Okay, welcome back to Gold Scratch. So a few minutes ago I made a video about this 427 build, and my producer suggested I make a follow-up video. So I mentioned in the original video that I was designing this engine to be about a 10-to-1 compression ratio. And why is that important? First of all, it's important to match the compression ratio of the engine to the camshaft that you're using. If you're using a big cam, you need a big compression ratio. If you're using a small cam, you need a small compression ratio. And here's the reason. If you use a big cam where the intake valve closes late coming up the cylinder, 70 or 80 degrees, or whatever, and low compression, you will have no torque at low speed. On the other hand, if you use an engine with a high compression ratio, where with a mild cam where that valve's closing, say 25 or 30 degrees after bottom dead center, you're going to have detonation, you're going to have too much dynamic compression, and you're going to burn a hole in your piston. So it's important to get that right, and we always pay a lot of attention to that. So I mentioned already that we had this engine was going to have 10-to-1 compression. So how do we determine that? It's determined by the dome volume of the piston. It's determined by the bore and stroke, which we know is 3.280, and this 4.280 times 3.76. And it's determined by the combustion chamber volume of the cylinder, the thickness of the head gasket, and the deck height. In other words, how close the piston gets to the top of the cylinder. So let's start right here. I've already mocked this engine up. The piston gets 20 thou away from the top of the cylinder, so that's one of the factors. This combustion chamber volume, we're going to show you how we measure that. The dome volume of the piston we know is 21 cc's. And the head gasket thickness, I mentioned already, I have a choice between the Cometic 50 thou and the Felpro 39 thou gaskets. That goes into a formula, and really it's the volume of the cylinder when the piston's at the top versus the volume of the cylinder when the piston's at the bottom. The ratio of the volumes is your compression ratio. From that, taking into consideration the closing point of the intake valve, you can determine your dynamic pressure and predict your compression pressure. So I've already done that for this engine. I should have a dynamic compression around 8-to-1 and a compression pressure around 170 psi. So, which is just ideal for the street as long as you're running on good fuel. One of the big factors that we determine, you have to know by way of measuring it. So, how we do that, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration. This is my burette setup here, and this is a 100 cc burette. Normally with a small block engine that has a combustion chamber volume of 64 cc's or so, it's a little simpler because this burette's only 100 cc's. So I know that this cylinder is around 103 cc's, so I'm going to have to do it in two stages. Go from 100 down to 50, fill it again, and then measure how much it goes in the second try. So how do we do that? First of all, we take the cylinder. Pick any cylinder, you can measure them all if you want, they should all be pretty close to the same thing. And seal it off with this plexiglass plate. You can buy the commercial plate if you want, which I have right here, which I paid big money for, which only has one hole in it. Or you can cut out your own piece of plexiglass and drill multiple holes, because you need to have a way to get air out of it, otherwise the air is going to back up. The next thing you have to do is make sure the cylinder is level for demonstration purposes. It's not quite, but it's close enough for demonstration. I'm a little bit off, but if I didn't already know the combustion chamber volume, I'd be more careful about that, but it's pretty close right now. So the reason I have these little heavy sockets on here, there's Vaseline I've used to seal the cylinder off so the water doesn't escape. Okay, and these sockets just kind of hold the plexiglass down, so it makes a good seal. So starting off, we just open the valve and let it flow. The medium I'm using here is Windex. You can use any medium that has some kind of color so you can see it, and it doesn't coalesce like water does. So as you can see, the combustion chamber volume is getting filled. And I'm going to stop it right at 50, and there, okay? Now I got to fill it again because I know we're over 100 cc's to fill this chamber. As you can see, it is filling up. I got to fill it back up to 100 again. Let it settle out here. Need a little more. I need a little more index here. Already, there we go. I want to get back up to 100 to start with. And I overdid it, so I got to move this out of the way a little bit out. Put it down to 100 again. Okay. Back in position. So the reason for the extra holes is to make sure the air can get out, otherwise you'll get air pockets in there and you won't get an accurate reading. It's a little bit tricky because you have to really take your time when you get near the end of the flow and watch for leaks. Sometimes it might take multiple tries. What I'm going to do is hold the light over there, Mike. You can see the cylinder filling up. And I'm pretty sure it's going to take more than 100 cc's because I've already said it's 103. Just to stop there for a second, the head has to be level. I think I mentioned that already, obviously in both directions. Otherwise you're going to have a high spot and you're going to get air trapped in one part of it. We're still filling, we still got a little space. There's 100 exactly. We're getting close. You can see a little air pocket there. Okay, and it takes a little bit of, you got to just watch when you see the cylinder getting full. So this is coming up. I'd have to do this. Some of the water, I'm at 56. I already measured this. I know it's 53. So some of the water has escaped. As you can see, it's got out of the cylinder. I didn't get a good enough seal. For purposes of the video, hope that makes the point. You got to get that seal properly.
What do we need? Better weights or different?
Yeah, I need more weight on it to get a better seal out of it. Some of the water's escaped. So obviously it's more than 50. It's not 56. And I know I've measured, so 50, by the way, I've already put 50 in it, right? So 56 is, would make 106 cc's, and I know it's about 103 cc's, so. That's how you measure combustion chamber volume, but as you can see, you have to also make sure, if you don't have a good seal, you'll have water seeping past the valves, and you'll have some water in the ports, and I don't have any of the valves are dry. So if some water was seeping past the valves, there'd be water in the ports, there isn't. You can seal the valves with Vaseline as well to make sure they don't leak. But as you can see, some of the water has escaped into the other chamber here. But for purposes of demonstration, that's how you do it. To be honest, it might take me 3 or 4 tries before I got a measurement that I'm satisfied that's accurate enough, because it is very tricky to get the last couple cc's, and I need to get a better seal on this plexiglass. That's how you measure combustion chamber volume, and that's how you determine compression ratio. Thanks for watching Gold's Garage.